Hi, I'm Jeremy Joseph, founder of the Big Easy Easton Brass and creator of Brick Easton. Many of us are enjoying the renaissance that the city of Easton is going through, but very few of us know where it began. I got a chance to sit down with the original friends of the State Theater and hear their story. So how long has it been since the three of you have been together in this theater?
Oh, it's been a long, long time.
It has
many
been
decades.
a long time.
Probably 30, 40 years maybe.
I'd say 35 years.
You want to take a walk around,
Sure.
take a look?
Sure.
Yeah, let's go take a walk.
Sure. The State Theater story is a story of a building that's very beautiful and has a great history in a city, Easton, Pennsylvania, which has a lot of history. And it came a point where it was endangered.
And I did what I could for a lot of years, and I said in 1980, when United Artists said we're getting rid of her, then I had to, well, it was time to do something, so Toni Mitman was one of the first people on my list with Gail Brogan and Historic Easton. We're going to save this thing, we got to do it now.
Ken Klabundi and Richard Wolf, who were historic theater enthusiasts, and they lovingly oversaw the care, taking care of the State Theater for probably 25 years before that, so that it would be able to be saved in the future if possible.
But when he realized that the end was near and something had to happen, he and Toni had discussed this, Ken called me and he said, is there anything you can do to help? We have to buy some time. The theater's being donated to the National Development Corporation, and their aim is to sell the building.
You couldn't blame them, they weren't making any money here. It was a losing proposition.
Well, United Artists, I think the last couple of years that they ran the theater, they had made it into a second run discount theater. I believe they were charging something like 80 cents, all seats 80 cents.
Everybody thought it was a trashy old theater on Northampton Street.
The State Theater wasn't just about showing movies. Easton at that point was in dire straits. The downtown was boarded up, there was no retail, the malls had opened, and the retail base of had a wonderful retail base in Easton. It was just a charming city. I fell in love with it first time I came here in 1966. It was love at first sight. The whole thing, the location, the history of it, the architecture. But by 1979, the downtown was empty. And so the State Theater wasn't just about doing a theater, it was about saving Easton.
Got to look beyond the peeling paint. Look beyond the roof that's leaking or the plaster that's falling. If this were restored, what could it do? What could it generate then?
Back in the mid-60s, Fabian Theaters, who operated the theater at that time, were going to do some painting, and they were going to paint these columns. And the assistant manager that was here then, a fellow by the name of Elmer Lambert, he thought that was an awful thing to do. So he got the head usher and himself came in here and cleaned them and polished them and put urethane or something on them and brought them back to life. So that when the Fabian district manager came and he says, why would you want to paint that? Look at it. And they all, oh, no, let's not do that.
But the building had such potential. I mean, when it was here originally, it just brought the rest of the city along with it. And if it could be brought back again, there in my mind, yes, maybe we can do it again. Maybe get enough people interested. This will be the catalyst to make something happen again. And it did.
Most of this is actually clean. It's the original paint.
It's the original paint.
Back in 1926. And the areas that had to be touched up were, and the areas that were replastered were completely repainted. But can you tell where? No, it's perfect. We came to an agreement whereby I took over the lease of the entire building, not just the theater portion, but the ballroom and the shops and so forth. And I literally took over running the theater only several days after United Artists closed out. And the thought again was that We keep the theater open. We don't want it to be dark. Keep people coming in. And I took on the responsibility then of paying all the bills. And that would give some time for Friends of the State to put together a group of people and build upon it so that they could eventually take over the management of the theater. And at that point, I would step aside, at least as the operator of the theater.
So at that point, the State Theater was donated to something called the National Development Council in New York. United Artists donated to them, so the building was for sale. So we started a little committee, and it became its own nonprofit called Friends of the State Theater.
I ran the theater, I think it was about 18 months.
But that was a critical 18 months of life support.
Yes, yeah, and it wasn't easy because, as Ken said, the theater was running in the red. It was not making any money, and it wasn't making any money for me either. So it was basically my love of theater that kept me going. And eventually, I remember I said to them that, I'm getting to my end too. I can't continue to do this too much longer.
So at that point, the attorney for that small, very small fledgling State Theater effort was Charlie Smith. So he and Gail Brogan and I, she was another board member, we went to New York to see if we could make an offer on the State Theater. And a friend here in Easton had said, here is $25,000, see if you can come back with the theater. So we went to New York, met with the National Development Council, and they said, how much would you like to pay? So I said $25,000, and they said, okay. And I said, oh darn, I should have said $5. Because I think they would have, at that point, they wanted to see this theater restored. So that's how we acquired the real estate, which was a miracle right then and there. So then we started having meetings in here and walking around to see what really would entail. And Ken Klabundy and Richard Wolf were instrumental in saying, the water's pouring in, but the roof, and we talked about the actual condition of the physical real estate of the building itself.
Corner, right above the exit doors, that whole corner wasn't there.
Yeah, falling out.
It fell out.
It
was soaking wet.
Soaking wet.
Soaking wet.
A good deal of it was gone, and you can see it doesn't look any different than anything else.
So they had to recreate that corner up there to match the color, the paint,
Thank goodness they had things to copy it from.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing how they did that too. They literally made casts off of the existing plaster. A liquid rubber, they would literally paint it onto the existing ornament, and they'd have to let it dry to a certain extent. And they put another, they'd put 8 or 10 layers on. It would take a couple days sometimes. And then they'd just pull this whole thing off, and there was this cast. They'd pour the plaster in it, and that's what they would put up.
We had that feasibility study. Then the feasibility came back and said, yes, it is possible, and it will cost X this, and it will take this and that, to do what it would take to actually do it. Influential members of the community became board members, Friends of the State Theater, on its own separate nonprofit corporation. And that board was now not just, Toni Mitman and Ken Klabundy and Richard Wolf, who, we were going to save this theater if at all possible. But, no one person or 3 people can save something like this. It takes a huge effort. And so we kept adding to the mailing list and kept, getting more and more people involved.
Philip and Antonia Mitman, right here front and center. You can see.
And here are our children, Brooke, Christian, Alexander, and Abby. And Historic Easton is here. But it really wasn't for self-aggrandizement. We had learned from other theater projects all over the country that they used selling state theater seats as a major fundraising tool. So we sort of led the way and said, okay, we'll start the campaign, and we put our names on there. But then it opened up a whole big campaign because every seat has a name, and it raised a lot of money. A friend of mine had a friend in New Jersey, and her friend was Celeste Holm, who was a very famous actress in the 1930s and 40s. And she said, I'll bring Celeste over here and see what she thinks. I said, great. So Celeste Home came over and she sat in the first row. And I said, "What do you think?" And she said, "This has to be done. There's no doubt about it." And she said, "This is why. Because it's not really about how to save a theater. It's about why. You know, there was a big why. And this was going to turn Easton around, maybe through cultural tourism. When theater patrons come to live theater, and many people have never seen live theater before, and children, they come in through the doors and it's their first exposure to something so exciting. So, you know, it's very important that little children come in here for the first time and that they create a love for live theater, for legitimate theater, for life, and makes them want to keep coming back for performances for the rest of their life.
So a beautiful lobby like this sets the stage for what you're about to experience?
Yes, yes. And one board member who really was interested in the project as an economic development catalyst for the whole city, he made it possible to buy the best market. He said, you know, you have to have the best market next door because that will be the key to the State Theater. So he bought the building for $50,000. So then we secured the real estate, the theater, and the best market next door. So now we had that all tied up, the package. So then we formed the building committee, and that's when I became the chairman of the building committee. And you have to remember, this was 1980, 1981. There were no computers and no cell phones. So when I wanted to find a construction manager, I went through the yellow pages in the phone book, and I thought, oh, here's one, Alvin H. Butts. They have a big full-page ad. They must be big enough to tackle a project like this.
So the size of your ad is what got you the State Theater job.
Yeah. So I called them. I said, you don't know me, but we have a project in Easton that, would you come and take a look? The building committee, we were standing in the theater waiting, and Alvin H. Butts, they flew to Easton in a helicopter and landed on the roof of the best market. And one of the things about the carpet, some of the original carpet was in the box and a few other places hidden in the theater. So we found a company in Georgia, in Dalton, Georgia, that reproduced this pattern, digitized it and computerized it.
Wow.
And recreated the carpeting for the whole theater. First thing we did was take down that swag that was across there, the original one, took it down and laid it across the back seat to see what it was, how it was made to have it duplicate.
Yeah.
And it was that determined the color scheme for the theater, because people often think, oh, gold theater, you're going to have red seats and red this. But it wasn't. The architects said, no.
Rose color.
It's that, whatever color this is.
So that set the theme for
Yes.
everything else.
And then we had the draperies recreated. These were all newly made. And then these seats were chosen to go with, but this was the original color scheme. It was not red.
So now you have a construction company, a restoration company signed on,
Construction
ready to do the
management firm. And it had to be someone that had experience with large scale projects, because this was going to be millions and millions of dollars. We knew that going in. I started looking around for in-kind contributions. And I talked to Metz Mechanical, and I talked to Ed Stipe at Stipe Plumbing, and I talked to Al Brado at his construction company. So we asked for in-kind contributions. One day, a big truck from Al Brado's construction company pulled up and a whole truckload of sheetrock, of drywall. And Stipe Plumbing very kindly did a lot of pro bono work just to see what kind of, HVAC mechanicals we're talking about in the basement.
So not just monetary donations.
No, we got
professionals.
in-kind contributions. My sister's father-in-law was with the lighting division of GE, General Electric. So he said, get me the list of bulbs you need for the State Theater. So I typed it up and sent it to him by mail with a stamp. You have to remember how that was back in 1980. And GE sent an entire truckload of every single bulb that we needed for the theater.
Wow.
The marquee and everything. And that was, it was great then because it was money we didn't have to raise.
You notice these panels here, there's one on either side of the proscenium. These are annunciator boards, and they were used to inform the guests at the theater as to what act was playing during vaudeville. And they would get a paper program listing all the acts, and they would be listed by A, B, C, D, E, F, etc. And the stagehands backstage could control to put the letter of the appropriate act when they were performing, and that way people knew what act they were seeing.
There's not a bad seat in the house in the State Theater. I don't think. Do you?
Oh, I don't think so, no.
No. Well, some of the best are in the loge up in the balcony.
They are the absolute best.
Fabulous. You feel like you're right there.
Each seat was wired to this board. So when an usher was looking to seat someone, you just see where the light is or isn't, and you can take them right to the seat without disturbing anybody. There were only, Wilmer and Vincent put this in 2 theaters in 1926, the State Theater here in Easton and the State Theater Harrisburg.
So the fundraising committee of the board, now the board was becoming more and more people of influence in the Lehigh Valley. These philanthropists became so enamored with the idea of saving the State Theater that they started to write checks, big checks, because it took big checks. This was not, it was a grassroots effort at every level. We took, $1 contributions, $5, $10. But the massive scale of it was going to take much more than $25,000 or $50,000 was not going to save the State Theater. It was going to take millions of dollars. And those philanthropists started getting behind the project and wrote checks. And it started to accrue into a big building fund. And then we could really start the restoration. We sent out a request proposal to 30 architectural firms and ended up hiring Vitetta Group Studio 4 in Philadelphia because Hy Myers was the architect for the Academy of Music. And he knew about acoustics, and he knew about theater, and he knew about historic preservation. So he knew about all of that and brought in Keystone Hood, a huge engineering firm in Philadelphia, to do the engineering. So we had this big team of very, very reputable, solid, professional team. The architect, construction manager, engineering, all of that. And the local plumbers, painters, everything. It was a charming.
How big did the Rolodex get for who was?
I have it.
Who was involved? There's an actual Rolodex.
I have it. I have the Rolodex, and I have the construction budget, which I would remember. It was just on a typewriter.
Yeah.
I have those. It's 4 or 5 pages stapled with line items and then red ink. We can't afford that. We can't. Yes, we can do that. No, we can't do that. All of that. So I have all of that. I have the Rolodex because that's what it took. It took all of the school kids and all of the service clubs in the whole Easton area. It was a grassroots effort of gigantic proportions, plus all of the philanthropists who donated funds to do it. And it was a public-private partnership with the city of Easton, and this was all volunteer, the whole thing. No one was paid 5 cents to do anything. It was all volunteer. The whole board was a volunteer. I volunteered for 20 years. Everybody volunteered. It's on a winch, right?
I'll come all the way down.
To clean it,
Yeah.
change the bulbs.
Actually, the first time it was changed in decades was 1974.
Oh,
And there's a good picture of you doing that. It was in the Eastern Express at the time.
that's
But
beautiful. It's just the most beautiful room in Easton, Pennsylvania.
It is. It absolutely is.
That alone is enough motivation. Oh, so beautiful. So it's a story not just of saving a theater, but what citizens can do to make a difference in their village, town, and city across the United States of America.
The State Theater today, what do you think of what it's become?
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's a place, like Celeste Holmes said, every community should have a place where the arts are available to everyone.
Shelley Brown, kudos to her. I told her she can never retire.
I hadn't been in here for a number of years, and when I got back in here and saw what they had done with the Best Market building next door, what they did with the Easton Camera Shop building in the front, it's a great facility. They've done a marvelous job of creating a performing arts center here.
The State Theater provides affordable, wonderful live programming. The State Theater is a presenting house. And so traveling shows of every type come here, and Shelley Brown has done a remarkable job, just a wonderful job keeping it going all these years.
The theater wasn't known. Now it's known all over the place. It's known for how well it's run. Shows like to come in here.
This is one of the best facilities. The way this has been accomplished and what they've done physically to make this whole thing work as a performing arts center, especially for a city this size, I think is absolutely fantastic.
It's generating the magic it did in 1926. It's generating that same magic now. And I think certainly the city of Easton is better off for it.
Did you ever see Freddie?
Yes.
Yeah? Well, tell us your Freddie story.
I was in here one night and it sounded like somebody hit the garbage can at the bottom of the stairs. And I just wrote it off. I looked out the office door, there was nothing there. Went back to my telephone. The garbage can at the other end of the lobby, somebody walked into it. So I went out to investigate, turned the lights back on, nobody here. Looked into the auditorium, nobody was here. Went back into the office, and then I heard footsteps going across the mezzanine. I said, there's definitely somebody here. So I called the Easton Police Department, and they came with 2 officers and a dog. And I had turned every light on in the place. We checked the place from stem to stern. I was on stage with the officer with the dog, and the other officer was in the lobby. And the policeman in the lobby yells in and says, I hear him walking across the balcony. Can't you see him? And the dog and I and the police officer sat here, and the dog followed this figure.
No way.
Going across the balcony.
So an officer outside of the room hears it.
Here's it.
The dog is
Sees
seeing
it.
something, and there's nothing to be seen. Wow.
I've peeked in here at night as a manager, and I saw a gentleman walk off stage. Well, what's this? You know, turn all the lights back on, go back and investigate. No open doors, no nothing. And a few days later, one of the projectionists here, I told him the story, and he just snickered. A few days after that, he came into my office and said, is this the guy you saw? And it was a picture of Fred Osterstock. Osterstock and I, we share the same birthday. We started in the theater business about the same age. We paralleled one another for a while. He was out on the road, I was out on the road.
Did you know?
No. No, he died in 1957. Now, I was coming to the movies here in 1957, so he was alive.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
no, never met him. But he's helping me write the book on this theater.
Oh, yeah?